Welcome to another edition of the Giants Huddle podcast brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. I am John Schmeelk, joined by a friend of the program. He's been joining us for probably about a half a decade now, Jordan Reid, who joins us from the mothership over at ESPN. Jordan, what's up, man?
What's going on, John? Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure joining you, and I always look forward to our draft talks.
Yeah, absolutely. We had fun hanging out down in Frisco and Mobile. We saw each other down there. We'll have each other on at the combine in a few weeks, but I thought this would be a good time just to talk specifically about the guys we saw at the two All-Star games. So let me start with a broad question. Senior Bowl. What was your favorite position group and why?
I mean, it had to be the trenches. That's what everybody was looking forward to coming into the event. And I think it definitely did live up to the hype. But the defensive line is really what stuck out to me. And you've heard a million people say it that this defensive line class is loaded. So I wanted to see if it was going to live up to the hype. And it definitely did. And we'll get into some guys or later on in the pod, I should say. But I mean, there was a plenty of guys that stood out. And at these events, you want these projected first or second round pick guys to really stand out and live up to that billing. And I thought a lot of guys did.
Yeah, and I got to be honest with you, and again, we'll get into the specific guys. I thought the offensive line held up pretty well in spots too for a group that wasn't as highly touted. I thought they had their fair share of wins.
Yeah, I agree. And, the interior line class wasn't really praised a whole bunch coming to the event, but there was some guys that definitely did play well. But the offensive tackle class is the one that really has been a little bit of a question mark, I would say, coming into the Senior Bowl, just because there's a lot of guys that, if they're a tackle, some people see him as a guard or vice versa, or even going inside to center. So what I really wanted to see really play out at the Senior Bowl specifically was who could hold up on an island and then who looked more comfortable inside.
Yeah, and I agree with you. We talked about this going in that so many guys, it's a question: can they stay at tackle? Do they have to move into guard? So why don't we kind of break that down first? But I think that's interesting. To me, the guys that showed me, I feel good about you at tackle. I thought Anthony Belton from NC State looked pretty comfortable out there. I thought Josh Connolly, despite that one rep that everyone blew up on social media when he tried to short set the guy, didn't get his feet stepped, got caught in the air. Look, it happens. It's a one-on-one. I thought he looked pretty good at offensive tackle. Marcus Bow, I think, is interesting because I think he's the athleticism for a tackle, but
Yeah.
the strength part of it and the length, I'm not positive about. And then, honestly, those might be the guys that I feel good about at tackle. Guys like Jonas Savanea, I think he looked better at guard. Curious to see which guys you feel good about at tackle. Wyatt Millum, I think, looked better at guard coming out of this week. Who do you think showed that, yeah, we can stick these guys out of tackle and feel good about it?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think Connolly looked like the best of the bunch outside of that one rep that you mentioned with Mike Green that really blew up on social media. He was the one I think has some question marks coming in as far as if he was a tackle or a guard, but I think he firmly proved that he was a tackle. I mean, he's a top 25 pick all day long for me. And
Yep.
like you said, outside of that one rep, I thought he had a really good week. Still needs to develop his body a little bit more. You could see that he wasn't as stout as some of his counterparts, like a Ariante Ursary or some of these other guys that are a little bit more stout and more developed from just a physique standpoint. But you talk about the upside with Connolly. I think he showed everything that he needed to show. I think he can be a starter as early on as a rookie. So he was one that really I thought got better as the week went on. Obviously, outside of that one rep that you mentioned with him with Mike Green, but a couple of players that I really wanted to see if they could hold up on an island. Emory Jones of LSU is one that I was really intrigued by that only played right tackle during his career at LSU. I know he played a couple games inside during his sophomore season there, but I think he looked more comfortable as the week went on. But I'm with you. I thought he looked more comfortable inside at guard as well as Savanea and then also Wyatt Milam as well. So once again, all these guys that we had some question marks about at tackle, I thought they looked more comfortable at guard. Marcus and Bo was really intriguing to me. I actually have him graded as a center, even though he didn't play that during his career at Purdue. I just think the athleticism, the strength that he plays with, and then also the foot quickness that he has. I think he's a plug and play option at center. And I'm with you. I didn't think he looked comfortable at tackle just because of the strength question marks with him. He had some rough reps early on in the week. But of course, like a lot of these other guys, he got better as the week went along. But he didn't play center outside of the warm-up reps that I saw. He played primarily at guard or tackle. I was hoping to see a little bit more of him at center just so I could feel a little bit better about my grade with him at center. But you have to project him as a guard, but a question mark at tackle. And then, of course, even though we didn't see him play at center, I still like him better inside.
I am assuming Belton, you feel good about him at tackle based on what you've seen.
Yeah, he was one that I did not get to on your list. Somehow
Yeah,
I
that's
missed him.
fine.
But he was outside of Greg Zabel. I thought he was the best performer of the offensive line. Of course, Connolly as well. Outside of those two, I think he was the best of the bunch. And I think he's a tackle all day long, even though he did take some reps at guard. And I think he has a versatility to play inside, but just his ability, his athleticism at 6'7", 345 pounds, I thought he had a really good week.
How about Ursary? Because I think he has the strength and the length to stick out at tackle. I don't feel, you know, I don't have questions about those two things, but some of the foot speed stuff, I think some of the quicker
Yeah.
guys did beat him on some outside rushes. Do you think he's going to be able to stick out there as more of a power tackle, or do you think he's a guy that might have to slide inside at some point?
So the thing that I wrote about Ursary is that it's never going to look pretty as some of his counterparts. He's just one of those guys that just
Right.
gets the job done. He's not as athletic as some of the other guys in this class. He's not going to look like a Josh Connerly or, a Kelvin Banks Jr. He's not going to have that type of athleticism, but the power and just the length that he has, I think he's a tackle all day long. And he showed that at the Senior Bowl. And once again, he's not going to be as flashy as some of these other guys, but you look up, you look at the box score. He doesn't have any pressures allowed and he doesn't have any sacks allowed. So it's not going to be as pretty as some of these other guys, but he just gets the job done. Now, he's not going to be a great fit in a zone scheme. I think he's better in that man gap power downhill type of a blocking scheme. I think that's where he's going to his home is really at just because of the power that he plays with. And once again, he's not an overly great athlete, but if you just ask him to get a body on a body and block downhill, that's really where his hay is going to be made at in the league on the next level.
The American team was stock full of a bunch of these small school guys that I know I had not heard of going into this event. I'm sure you had done your work on them already.
Yeah.
Which one of those small school guys do you think really kind of showed a value? It was all right, put me up against Big Ten guys, SEC guys, I can hold my own.
He's a developmental prospect, but I thought he really held up well, and that's Carson Vincent from Alabama A&M. And you look at his frame, he's every bit of 6'5". I think he came in at 314 pounds,
Yep.
which is a terrific weight for him, especially with the small school guys. You always worry about are they on the skinnier side, and we have to develop not only their game, but their body as well. But I mean, he looked the part. He looked just like all of his counterparts out there as well. Now, the strength does need to get better with him. I think that's something that does need to improve with him over time. But you talk about an intriguing late round developmental prospect. Carson Vincent would definitely be one that I would have circled.
All right, let's talk about the defensive line now. Which guys from that group, you can go tackle or edge, your choice, you think really shine the brightest?
Well, man, I'm just looking at my list here. There's so
That's
many
a long
guys
list,
to
bro. I'm
choose
with you.
from. One that I did a lot of tape on, but hadn't seen in person was Darius Alexander of Toledo. I mean, he blew me away, John. I was so impressed with him, and he played five technique, he played some three technique, and he even slid inside and played some one technique throughout the week as well. And it didn't matter if it was the game, if it was one-on-ones, if it was inside drill, he stood out. I mean, I noticed him in every single drill. The strength that he has at 6'4", 305 pounds. There's so many different ways that you can use him. His hand power, his ability to disrupt. He can two gap, he can one gap. There's a lot of things that he can do, and I think he's a scheme versatile type of player. So he's one that really stood out to me. But the one that really stood out to me the most was Walter Nolan of Ole Miss, and I had an opportunity to see him live when he played against Wake Forest, which is right in my neck of the woods. I'm in Charlotte, so wanted to make sure to get eyes on him, and he stood out in that game. But I wanted to see him going up against the best at the Senior Bowl, and I thought he was the best among all of the defensive linemen. So Walter Nolan, I would be shocked if he's not a top 20 pick. He was one that really stood out to me as well.
Let me ask you about Darius Alexander because I marked him down too. He was one of my top five guys, and I haven't watched his tape yet. How the hell did that guy not have more than 5 sacks at Toledo? I mean, like, like, I watch him here, and I'm like, where was the production? So, can you answer that for me?
So him and Shamar Stewart of Texas A&M, those are two guys you're like, man, when you see him up close and you see him, you're like, how did this guy not have more than 5 sacks and Stewart only had 1.5 sacks?
Yeah.
So it's like, why do these guys not have more production? So the simple answer is they had a lot of what I like to call almost plays. So they're getting in the backfield, but they just didn't finish those plays. So that's very frequent on both of their tapes. So they just have to clean up those almost plays and finish them with sacks or tackles for loss. It's not like they weren't getting disruption. They were getting plenty of that. They just weren't finishing those plays.
Yeah, Stewart, I saw that for sure. Do you think Shamar Stewart's going to be the highest drafted player that were at either of these two All-Star games this weekend, except for obviously Shador Sanders?
Yeah, I would say I think he has a chance to be. I think it would be between him, Walter Nolan, Josh Connolly, of course, and then there's some other guys that could be a contention for that as well. Armand Mimbo, who we didn't get to see,
Yeah.
unfortunately, just because he was sick. He's another name that I would throw in there. But Shamar Stewart, I mean, he was etched out of stone. 6'5", 281 pounds. I've never seen a more chiseled and well put together 281 pounds in my lifetime. And then you add in the explosive traits with him. He's one of those players that you would love to just get your hands on. And you can just see in those draft rooms, those defensive line coaches, they're going to be salivating over him just because of what he can be 2 to 3 years from now.
All right, the edge guy that we talked about when we mentioned the offensive lineman was Mike Green out of Marshall. Obviously, super productive. Said he production is not an issue for him or for Ezraku for that matter.
Yeah.
17 sacks, 16 and a half sacks. But both guys are on the smaller side, right? 248, 251. I think both guys have showed on tape they're willing to, use some power and use some strength. What did you see from those two guys on the edge?
I think they're both of those guys that you kind of have in a similar tier as far as where they could end up going in the draft. Ezra was probably a little bit lower on the draft board where Mike Green could go right now. I would say Mike Green is probably in that top 25 range. Ezra is definitely probably in the top 40 to top 50 range,
Yeah.
I would say, but very similar or caliber type of players from a body type standpoint. And then from a scheme standpoint, more so of your five techniques in a four down or a 3-4 outside linebacker that also can drop in coverage as well. But one thing we knew coming into the Senior Bowl was that these guys can get after the passer. So one-on-one drills, the pass rush repertoire, none of that surprised me about them. So what you really wanted to gauge with them was the 11 on 11 drills when those run schemes were really ran right at them. And I thought both of them passed the test very firmly as well, just because how much hand power did they have? Could they set a firm edge? And then just how well could they defend the run? Those were the big question marks about both of them coming into the event. And I thought both of them checked both of
Now,
those
unfortunately,
boxes, I
not.
should say.
Yeah, and neither guy unfortunately played in the game, so we had to just go
Yeah.
on the practice reps for that. All right, I'm gonna go to a couple guys that I thought actually one more positive before I hit a couple of guys that I'm maybe a little disappointed in. I was not familiar with Oluwafemi Oladejo before I showed up at the
Yeah.
Senior Bowl. I did some. I'm looking forward to diving into the tape. My understanding is that had never played edge before this year. He was an inside backer, right? First year at
Yep.
edge. Oh man, 6'2", 3/4, 261, 33 and a half inch arms. And just the power that he plays with at that size, even had him do some rushing over the guard at some point later in the week. That guy opened my eyes. I know, the experience and maybe a ton of the production's not there, but Jordan, I mean, he looked more of a physical specimen that I think teams can build on than even Green and Ezeraka, the two guys we just talked about.
Yeah, he was one that I put a star beside immediately to go back to watch more tape on him just because I had watched about 4 or 5 games on him already. And I had a fourth round grade on him coming in, but I'm like, man, I'm way too low on this guy just because he was playing everywhere. And what I love about these All-Star games, John, is that you get to see the guys that are really your outspoken or energizer bunnies.
Oh, he
And he
doesn't stop
definitely was
talking, dude.
that.
That
He
dude
does
does
not
not
stop
shut up,
talking
man.
at all. And I mean, you just love seeing guys like that. You can just see that they're trying to take advantage of the moment, but also they just love the game and being around the guys as well. So he was one that was that Energizer Bunny in a loaded defensive line group on both teams. So he's one I definitely have to go do more games on, and I'm probably going to end up a higher grade on as well. He's definitely going to come up from that fourth round grade that I had on him.
All right, this event is not tailored for a guy like Landon Jackson, right? Who's kind of a blue collar, trenches, stop the run, use your length, use their power. But I thought he had a really good day three on Thursday.
He
I
did.
thought he had some good pass rush wins. Is he still holding steady, you think, at the top of the second round based on what you saw during the week?
Yeah, so I was talking to some scouts on the sideline as you saw all of us talk and we discussed these prospects. And, when there's not a lot of what I like to call high-end talent at the top of the draft, you want to hit on guys that, you're going to hit doubles or triples with. Maybe not a home run or a grand slam, Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, Landon Jackson, they're those guys that they're going to come in, they're going to be productive. They're not going to be, 10 to 12 or 15 type sack guys,
Right.
but they're going to come in, they're going to be very disruptive against the run, or I should say firm against the run. They're going to give you some type of pass rush production as well, and you're going to be able to put them in the rotation right away. And that's the vibe that I got from Landon Jackson. But what I loved about him is that he's one of those guys that just soaking up the moment. He's staying after practice. He's asking the coaches multiple questions. He's staying after practice with other guys as well, just trying to pick their brains as well. So you can tell that he loves the game. And he's gotten better every single year that he's been in college as well. Everybody has seen that frantic video about him going around the pop-up dummies looking like a zero-star recruit, and he ends up being one of the best players on Arkansas's defense over the past few years. So he's one guy that I could see going inside the top 75 that you can plug and play right away. Maybe not a starter, but he's going to be in your rotation somehow, some way.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Couple guys, Ty Robinson, I loved his tape going into the event. I thought he was a little bit quiet the first couple of days, and he's a guy that gets off the ball so quick, gets up feel for that Nebraska defense, a defensive tackle. He was a little quiet in the pass rush drills, I thought, during the week, and I was surprised by that, given, frankly, how productive he was and how well he got up the field in all these games during the regular season.
He's one of those guys that's just a gamer. Like he's never going to be that guy that's going to be one of the first or the second picks in a pickup basketball game. But
Right.
when you go and play the game, he's going to be one of those guys that plays really good defense. He's going to set good screens for you to get around. He's one of those guys that you just love to play with. And like Landon Jackson, like we mentioned a couple seconds ago, you're going to be able to plug and play him in a rotation. And he's never going to be that A-level starter for you, but somebody that you can count on throughout the duration of their rookie contract. I definitely could see that from him.
Two other edge guys I thought I'd see a little bit more of off the edge. Princely Umanmielen out of Ole Miss, who I thought he tried a couple of these inside spin moves and they just were not
Yeah.
working for him over the course of the week. And then obviously a player who great pedigree, Bronco Nagurski Award winner, Kyle Kennard, SEC Defensive Player of the Year. You know, he was there, he was fine, but those two guys didn't show me the type of like really juice and burst I expected off the edge.
Yeah, and they're two players that really are in the same tier in this
Yeah.
edge class. I would say probably in the top 75 range. I think that's where both end up going. And I agree with you. I was expecting a little bit more out of both. It was unfortunate not to see Kennard on the last day of practice. And then Umami Ellen, he just didn't stand out as much as you would like, especially with how talented he is as far as rushing the passer. I thought he would stand out a little bit more in the one-on-one sessions and then also the team sessions as well. So what it's going to come down to with both of them is now we go to the combine. The testing is going to be really how they, what I call, differentiate themselves in the cluster of this talented edge group that we do have. So those are two names to definitely keep an eye on as far as how they do test at the combine.
And then finally, up front, what am I supposed to make of Deion Walker? I watched him over the
Yeah.
summer. I watched his 2023 tape, and I'm like, this guy could be a top 10 player. Like, that's how he looked like Dexter Lawrence to me. And I don't say that lightly. I've seen Dexter Lawrence every day. I know what that dude can do. That's what he looked like in 2023. Then I went back and I watched his tape about a month ago in 2024, and I'm like, this does not look like the same dude. Then I figured, all right, he's going to show up at the Senior Bowl. He's that big. He's that athletic, one-on-one. He's just going to toss these guys around. And I'm watching Clay Webb. I know he's from Georgia originally, but from Jacksonville State, like just stoning him at the line. I'm like,
Yeah.
is he just playing too high? Is he out of shape? What's the deal with Deion Walker? And how is a team going to convince themselves that they can develop what's clearly a very physically talented guy into a more productive and consistent player?
He's going to be one of the more polarizing prospects in this year's class. And it's either you like him or you don't like him. There's really no in between with him. And you're right. I thought the 2023 tape was much better, where he had, I believe, 7.5 sacks. And then this past season, he only had 1.5 sacks. So the production obviously was way down with him. But I mean, you've seen him up close. He's massive, 6'7", 340 pounds. He looks exactly how you want a three technique or a one technique to look inside. But the motor doesn't always run as hot as you would like. And then also, he just plays way too high. But with Walker, he's never a player that's going to play with adequate pad level just because of how big he is. And then you have to remember, he played over 85% of the defensive snaps at Kentucky. So I think it was a situation of where he was just gassed a lot of times in those games. So a scout raised the question to me, what happens when he plays, 60% of the snaps? We reduce that a little bit more to where he can play a little bit faster and the pad level can be a little bit better. So it's a situation of where you like him or you don't. I currently have a second round grade on Walker. It wouldn't surprise me if he ends up going in that range or if he does end up going a little bit higher. So I think this is a prospect that's really going to be very split in a lot of draft rooms, but he's one player that I do have a second round grade on, and he's another that I'm looking forward to seeing how he does test at the combine.
Huddle up, get in here. If you're lined up here, you gotta go over the middle with it to score.
Right. How do we make that happen?
I don't know, but Citizens does. Make sense of your money with Citizens, official bank of Eli Manning.
Giants Huddle Podcast is brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. From game day celebrations to your everyday financial needs, Big Blue fans can get the most out of every moment with Citizens. Learn more at citizensbank.com/Giants. All right, Jordan, obviously people always watch the wide receivers and DBs at these events and their one-on-ones and in the team stuff. Not as exciting a group as I think we've had in years past in terms of guys going to be really high picks. Who stood out for you among the wide receivers? Why don't we start there?
Yeah, I mean, I thought a lot of guys stood out. Jaden Higgins of Iowa State was one that really stood out to me. Tez Johnson of Oregon was another Tank Dell type of receiver. shorter side, very twitchy, just understands how to get open. But the one that was most surprising to me was Jack Betch from TCU. And I thought he was the best of the bunch in this year's class. And, the story is incredible what happened to him over the past few months. Unfortunate, I should say. But you can tell that he was playing with a chip on the shoulder and a different type of purpose. And I mean, the dude catches everything. I mean, that's what you want to see in these 7-on-7, these one-on-one drills. And then when it translates over to team, but it's not just how well he was catching the ball, he was creating separation as well. So he's another that I definitely have to go back and do a little bit more film work on. I had a late third round grade on him coming in, but it wouldn't surprise me if he comes in, if he ends up being drafted somewhere late second, early third round, or even higher. That wouldn't surprise me at all just because of how well he played in Mobile.
Yeah, he's built very well. He's
Yeah.
strong. He's got the guns, right? He caught everything, contested catch, physical receiver. What I want to do when I'm gonna go back and I watch him now, how well does he separate? Because I'm not sure how
Mhm.
consistently he's going to be able to get that separation. Now there could still be a role for him. Again, the art route runner, I think all that stuff was great. And how he tests, I think, will be big in terms of how fast he runs, right? And his three cone for change of direction.
Yeah, those will be the things that everybody is waiting on just to see how well he tests the three cone, the 40 time, just so we can have an actual number on him. But as far as what the product is on the field, I think it's without question, that third or early fourth round range. But it wouldn't surprise me if he goes a little bit higher than that.
Yeah, I'm with you. And looking, you mentioned Tez Johnson. This event is made for a guy like that. He's just
Yeah.
too quick and fast. You can't cover him one on one. Two other receivers. I agree with you on those two. I thought Higgins' teammate Jalen Noel. I thought he had a really nice day.
Yep.
A lot of people think of these slot guys as quicker than fast. That dude's a vertical slot, man. They ran him deep, and he was getting separation all day long. And then I thought the other receiver on the American team that did a pretty nice job was Ty Felton out of Maryland. I thought he'd be a little bit taller and be a little bit heavier based on what I saw on tape, but
Yeah.
I thought he did good on all three levels of the field getting open.
Yeah, we had a lot of these receivers that kind of look the same, especially when they're in the same tier as well. Kind of those, what I like to call those power slot type of receivers. That's about, 5'9" to 5'11", 170 to 190 range. There was a lot of receivers in that range. You mentioned Noel. We haven't even mentioned Xavier Restrepo, who was one of the better slot receivers in this draft class too. So Noel definitely was really impressive. Just his change of direction skills and his ability to get open and create separation, I thought was one of the better the parts of his week in Mobile.
Kyle Williams, did you watch him before he got there?
Yeah.
Because that guy's fast, man. Like you look at him, you think traditional slot, but he was running away from guys deep. I was pretty impressed with him as well.
Yeah, he probably was one of the bigger surprises for me as far as just how well he looked up close. Now, he's not as shifty or as quick twitch that I like to say as some of these other receivers, but everything's so smooth for him. His change of directions, his catching ability, his ability to get open. And I actually got a text about him coming into the week, and somebody said that he's actually been training with Ricky Prohl, the longtime Carolina Panthers receiver, and he just couldn't stop raving about him during training. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna not get too excited to see if it really translates over into practice and see what Ricky Prohl was raving about. But now I see why he was raving so much about him. I mean, the route running ability, the catching ability, and then just the hand-eye coordination with him. I was really impressed with Kyle Williams.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, defensive backs. As a Ray Thomas, and I think I have that pronunciation right. Correct me if I'm wrong. Out of
Yep.
Florida State, I think body type wise, he's great. I don't know if he tried to, but he got put one on one against Tez Johnson way too much, and that's just not a
Yeah.
good matchup for him. And good
Yeah.
for him if he won the matchup against the best guy. I appreciate that, but not a great matchup for him. He's a guy that stood out. I thought Quincy Riley was pretty good. Darian Porter, I thought good length. Playing outside, he was a guy that kind of jumped out at me. I thought was good, and then Max Hairston out of Kentucky. Those are the corners that kind of jumped for me. I'm curious who from that group you really liked.
Yeah, there was three guys coming in that really were in the same tier for me. Azariah Thomas, as you mentioned, Trey Amos of Ole Miss, and then also Max Hairston of Kentucky. I had second round grades on all those guys coming in. So I really wanted to see who really stuck out and really differentiated themselves. I thought Thomas was the best of the bunch. Then after that, Hairston and then Amos. But it really just depends on who you're looking at the certain time that you're looking at with these guys as well. So I think they're all in that similar cluster, but Thomas, just the movement skills with him when he wasn't matched up against Tez Johnson really stuck out about him. And then, of course, we didn't get to see Harrison on the last day, but the first 2 days, I thought he really did stand out.
Yeah, I thought he did too. All right, I have trouble in these practices, Jordan, figuring out running backs and linebackers because their whole job is trying to tackle somebody and there's no
Yeah.
tackling. So, what are you supposed to see? Let's start with running backs. I thought Trevor Etienne, after watching him at Georgia, And I feel like the burst that he had in Florida the previous year was not quite as there. I don't know if he was banged up and he got healthier. I thought that bounce and kind of burst that he had, I thought at Florida a couple years ago was back.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I thought he was great. Every single day, I thought he performed really well. And it wasn't just the running drills, but the pass catching stuff, which is really his wheelhouse of where he should excel. I thought he looked so smooth doing that. And, they had him running the Texas routes, the wheel routes, the swing routes, everything that he was doing. He looked like the wide receiver out there. I thought he looked really efficient. But one guy that I was really surprised by was LaQuint Allen of Syracuse. And, I watched a couple games on him coming in, and we actually, when I was helping out the ACC network this fall, we actually did we had a visit up there, I should say, with Fran Brown, and we sat down with Kyle McCord and LaQuint Allen. So that really was my first exposure to him in person. That translated over to the season this year, but seeing him against the best of the best in Mobile, I thought him along with ATN, I thought they were the best two running backs there. I was really surprised with LaQuint Allen, just how well he moved.
Two other running backs I want to ask you about. Ollie Gordon. It's a guy that a lot of people were really highly regarded on him heading into this draft process. I never saw like the burst. I wasn't totally on board with that. He runs really high, but he's 230 pounds, which I think you'd
Yeah.
like to see. What are your thoughts on Gordon? And then on the other end of the spectrum, RJ Harvey, smaller guy, 207, 5'7.5". I think probably just burst wise, the best running back there, but he likes to bounce a lot. So just your
Yeah.
thoughts on those two guys.
Well, I'll start with Ali. Ali is, I think, a scheme specific type of back. You want him moving more so downhill. Once again, the man gap power zone. You don't really want him in the zone scheme. I should say he's not really a one cut and go type of runner. He's more so if you want him moving behind those pullers, making decisions, and then hitting the ball downhill using his size. So with him, the vision is a little bit questionable with him. That's another aspect I would like to see him get a little bit better at. But I mean, the size, 6'1", 233 pounds. He obviously was the biggest running back in this year's group. But once again, he has to be in a certain type of scheme for him to excel. And the production obviously was much better in 2023 as opposed to last year in 24. But they had so many questions up front at Oklahoma State. So I'm really interested to see where he does end up going. I have a late third, early fourth round grade on him right now, but it wouldn't surprise me if he goes earlier. But it wouldn't surprise me if he goes later as well, just because there may be some teams that have some question marks about some of the characteristics that we have outlined with him already. So he's another interesting one in a really loaded running back group. And then RJ Harvey, like ETN, very similar type of runners. Those very elusive type of runners that can run inside, that can run outside. You want to use them as an asset in the passing game as well. He obviously was UCF's best weapon last year. They did a really good job of utilizing him all over the place, and they did the same thing in Mobile, using him in the slot a little bit. I saw him running some routes in the slot a little bit as well. So really interesting player for sure.
Devin Neal's boring, but I think he's pretty good. I watched him
Yeah.
in Kansas. I'm like, all right, he's not that quick. He's not that big, but damn, he finds the holes. He gets through them and he gains yards. Are we sleep on him a little bit just because the tape's not exciting, even though he's just really, really productive?
I'm not. Devin Neal's awesome, man. He's one of my favorite running backs in this class. I have a third round grade on him, and I think he's one of the most versatile in this year's bunch. I mean, you can just turn on the tape against
He's
Colorado or
good at
Illinois. Yeah,
everything.
I mean, there's no holes in this game at all, and he's very thick as well from like a stout
Yeah.
standpoint. 5'11". I think he came in at 220 pounds, which was much heavier than what they listed him on the roster. I think like 5 or 6 or so pounds, I should say, heavier than what they listed him as on the roster. So, I mean, there's not a lot of holes in this game at all. And when we look back on this loaded draft class, it would not surprise me if we look back and say that he was easily one of the top three running backs in this class.
All right, it's a stacked running back class. It's also a stacked tight end class. And I think, again, that was reflected in the guys that were here, Jordan. Who from this group really, made you look down at your sheet and put a little star and say, all right, this guy really helped himself this week?
I mean, I was excited about this group coming in. Elijah Arroyo of Miami, I
He was
thought he
great.
was terrific. He's such a smooth mover, man. He's so efficient, really good mover, really good hands, snatches the ball out of the air. I was really impressed with him. And then Mason Taylor of LSU, he's another that was just so smooth in everything that he did. The route running is just so easy for him. Terrence Ferguson of Oregon was another interesting one coming into the week that I had a star beside as far as just to pay a little bit extra attention on him. Even though the production wasn't overly great, in my opinion, at Oregon, I thought he showed some things that he really didn't show on tape that he was capable of in Mobile.
All right, tell me what I'm missing on Mason Taylor, because you are not the first person to tell me that they loved him, they thought he was fantastic. I think he's a really good all-around player. He's big enough to block. I
Hmm.
talked to him for like 5, 6 minutes. Really nice kid, humble. You would never know he's the son of a, former, of an NFL Hall of Famer. Like you would have no idea. Great kid. But I don't see the burst and athleticism of like an Arroyo, right? I kind of see him as good at a little bit of everything, but I don't see that elite trait with him. What am I missing? Tell me why I'm wrong.
Well, I mean, it just depends on what you're looking for from those tight ends. I don't think he's a guy you're going to depend on as far as an inline blocker a lot. That's just not his strong suit. And this is why I differentiate F and Y tight ends in my rankings. Y
Sure.
is more so the dual threat types that you're using inline and then also as a receiver. He's a true F tight end that you don't want him inline blocking at all. You want him more so playing in the slot. You can put him in the backfield a little bit if you want to get creative with him, but he's going to be a true receiver. But with him, he isn't an overly twitchy guy, but he's one of those players that's just really smooth and understands the nuances and the details of playing the position. He's not going to create a whole lot of separation, but he can make those contested grabs that you love to see. And I think it was the last day when they were doing the red zone period, a red zone 7-on-7, and also a red zone one-on-ones. That's really where you got to see his skill set really shine. So I'm with you in that he's not going to be an overly twitchy or athletic type of player, but when you're talking about the smoothness and understanding the nuances and the details of the position strictly from a route running standpoint, I think he's one of the better ones in this class.
I think that's a really good description. All right, linebackers and safeties. Again, these are two spots that I struggle with in these practices. Your thoughts on guys that jumped at you, those two spots?
One was Demetrius Knight of South Carolina. He's one I think is still being slept on this class, and he has a interesting story. I mean, a lot of people have heard about it already. He started off his career at Georgia Tech for the first 4 years, and then he went to UNC Charlotte before coming to South Carolina for 1 year. He's already married. He's a father of two kids. He actually did DoorDash to make ends meet during his time throughout his career. So
Wow.
incredibly humble a prospect, and you talk to him. I mean, he's just happy to be there. But he just had a switch that he turned on during practice of where he just turned into a completely different guy. And that's what you love to see. He actually wore the green dot at practice as well, which is something that I look forward to seeing exactly who has the green dot, who's calling the plays during practice as well. So you know he has the mental capacity, and he's one of those players that's battled through a lot of adversity as well. So love his story, being very slept on in this class. And I actually have a late third round grade on him right now. And I think that's a fair range of where he could end up going. Just looking at my list as well, Eugene Asante is another of Auburn that really stood out. Then also Jeffrey Bassa of Oregon. He's another that I have some question marks about as far as his change of direction skills and then just how consistent he could be in coverage. But it really surprised me with his movement skills.
How about the safeties?
Um, Keandre Scott is one that I didn't know a whole bunch about coming into the event. Out of Illinois State, he was a late add, but you talk about somebody that came from a small school that really stood out. He had a couple of big hits in practice, but also the fluidity with him. I think he's capable of playing not only strong safety, but also he could play some free safety as well. He's one that I was really surprised by. Jonas Sanker is one that I was really surprised by as well. He's another that I thought primarily could only play as a free safety as far as being on the top of the roof of the defense, but he showed me some things as a strong safety in practice as well as far as his consistency as a tackler, which is something I thought he had to clean up coming into the event. But one that I absolutely fell in love with was Billy Bowman of Oklahoma. I thought he had a really good showing. He just needs to get better with some of his tackling angles. But as far as the ball skills and just being a true center field type of safety, I fell in love with him during practice.
If you want to know how to manage 2 minutes of crunch time football, I'm your man. But if you're wondering about a long-term financial plan, you should talk to Citizens. Hey, I can also talk lawn care.
I'd like to learn about a mowing routine.
Yes, I knew I could help. Make sense of your money with Citizens.
I was surprised that, and I'll go back to linebacker for a second, that Jack Kaiser moved as well as he did. I was thinking
Yeah.
traditional, Notre Dame middle linebacker, right?
Yeah.
The guy that's not going to move
Yeah.
that well. He's going to be good between the tackles and be a big hitter.
Yeah.
He was actually
Yeah.
pretty good in coverage during the week. I was pretty
was.
impressed by his movement skills.
He was. I'm right there with you. I thought there was some stiffness that he showed on tape and that he was just going to be a traditional box safety, but I thought he held up well in coverage. And that's what I love about the one-on-ones. And yes, I know it's catered for the wide receivers, and you see these guys doing these 4 or 5 second releases at the line of scrimmage. But, for the safeties and also the corners, you get to see how well they move and just how dependable they are in man coverage as well. So Jack Kaiser is one that I was definitely surprised by, especially his movement skills.
No, I'm with you on that. All right, we didn't talk about the quarterbacks that's what everyone wants to hear about. Um, Jalen Milrow started real slow. I
Yeah.
wonder. I would have liked to see him unleash the arm a little bit because I know he has a big
Mhm.
arm, but I didn't see it. Show me the big arm,
Yeah.
Jalen. Just chuck it downfield a couple times. I thought Jackson Dart was pretty consistent. Dylan Gabriel, small, obviously, not the biggest arm, but I thought he was accurate and on time. Chuck showed, I thought, his kind of physical traits, a little
Mhm.
inconsistent. Your thoughts on this group of quarterbacks and anybody that really either helped or hurt themselves?
Yeah, it's always interesting with these quarterbacks just because you really want to gauge the arm strength and the accuracy, but you can't knock them too much just because, like I tell everybody,
They don't know
they
the
didn't
wide
meet half,
receivers. Yep.
right? They didn't meet half of these guys until the connecting flight over to Mobile. So timing is something that's always going to be off with them. And you have to remember, this is these guys' first time going through NFL verbiage, taking snaps from under center, and then also relaying these plays to these players as well. And that's something that I had to remind myself, especially with Dylan Gabriel. He couldn't catch the snap under center the whole first day. He dropped probably about 4 or 5 snaps, but you have to
Right.
remember he's not working those mechanics at all over the first, 6 or 7 months of the season. So this is his first time really taking those snaps from under center. And then with Jackson Dart, it's a similar thing. He didn't take any snaps from under center just because everything's so signal based. And this is his first time going through those progressions. So with Dart, what I wanted to see was he comfortable going through those first, second, third steps, getting to his check down? Can he do those things and exhaust those progressions? So I thought he did a really good job the second and the third day. I thought he really looked comfortable that third day. He had a really good pass over the middle of the field. I can't remember who it was too, but he hit
Yeah.
a skinny post over the middle. I thought that was one of the better throws of the Senior Bowl. So you just want to see those guys progressively get better. And then with Milrow, I thought he did struggle those first 2 days, but the third day I thought he settled in a little bit more. It's just the inconsistency over the short to intermediate parts of the field, which was a big question mark with him coming in. But the deeper parts of the field, he had a really nice wheel route throw. I believe it was to Jack Betch down the sideline on a wheel route during the third day of practice. So with Milrow, you just have to have a really distinct or detailed development plan with him just because he just needs a lot of refinement as a passer. So you have to be really patient with him during his development.
Do you think his measurements, his height, and his hand size are going to scare some teams off, despite the fact he's a great athlete?
Um, that's a great question. I don't think it's going to scare teams off. I think it just depends on how much leeway or runway that you have to development. Just because I think he's at least 2 years away
I
from really
agree.
being counted upon as far as a refined passer, and that's why I say he has to go somewhere that's really patient with him, just because he has such a ways to go as a passer in the short to intermediate areas. Jalen is just more comfortable when you have concepts that allow things to play out, and what I mean by play out is that those deeper concepts to where he can set up, drop back, and really read those things that are happening down the field. That's why he's more comfortable in the deeper parts of the field. But when he has to make those pre-snap reads and what I call grip it and rip it type of throws in the short to intermediate areas, that's really where he struggles the most.
All right, final two questions. Just throw me a couple names of guys that you saw at Shrine that were on the field, not the guys that showed up, it didn't work. That really kind of jumped at you and said, "All right, you know, these guys impressed me. Maybe even we can start talking about it as a potential maybe day two pick."
Two guys really stood out to me, John. The first one is Aronde Gaston Jr., or the second, I should say, the tight end from Syracuse. I thought he had some really good movement skills, and he's one of those guys similar to a Mason Taylor that I think is a true F tight end. You don't really want to use him in line a whole bunch just because he's not going to be counted upon consistently as a blocker, where his value is going to be is in the passing game. And another who I thought, or two, I should say, two more that I like to mention that I thought was the two best players is Jordan Phillips, the interior defensive lineman of Maryland. I mean, you see him. I mean, he's stacked. He was shredded. He has the physique and the size that you love to see at the position, and nobody could block him just because of how explosive he was. And then he's only 20 years old. So those younger type of prospects that you love to see just because the upside could be immense. And there's no telling what he could be 3, 4, 5 years from now. But the best player that I thought was at the Shrine Bowl was Kansas cornerback Kobe Bryant. I was really blown away with how well he played, and he didn't play in the game, and he didn't practice the last day. But I thought during those first 2 days, you saw everything that you love to see, especially from a player that you're expecting to be one of those top 5 players overall top five prospects, I should say, at the event. I thought he was by far the best player there.
I'm with you. We're aligned on that. All right. Now, besides watching the prospects, you mentioned you talk to scouts, you talk to people in the league. What's your feel right now? And again, this is going to change. We're going to talk again in a month at the combine. What's your feel for what might happen ahead of the Giants at 1-2? Titans with a brand new front office, and now with the Browns, Myles Garrett trade request. You know how that affects all these things. We have no idea. How do you think those? What do you think those first two picks are going to look like, and just a general tenor of what this top of the draft is going to look like, specifically with Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, and when they might drop off the board?
It's pre-combine, so there's a lot of guessing games that are happening right now, honestly, John, and everybody's just speculating. But it's either quarterback or edge rusher for both of them, in my honest opinion. And it's either a quarterback or Abdul Carter. I think he's obviously the only one that is worthy of going at the top of the draft. I should add in Colorado. Travis Hunter as well. Those are your top two guys in the draft, in my opinion. But
I agree.
the unfortunate thing for the Giants is that both of those teams they need a quarterback. So the Giants aren't in a great spot right now. You're hoping and praying and you're crossing your fingers that Abdul Carter is obviously one of those picks, whether it's to the Titans or to the Browns, either one, just because now you're in position to either get Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. So, like I said, it's still early and a lot of speculation that is happening right now, but it's either a quarterback, Travis Hunter, or Abdul Carter. Those are going to be your top three picks. But once again, it's early right now. But Giants fans, keep crossing your fingers that one of those two players, Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter, go 1 or 2 overall, just because the quarterback is going to fall in your lap then.
Well, let me ask you: do you think that, let's say, two quarterbacks go 1-2, is that necessarily a bad thing? Just in terms of how you have these players graded in comparison to the quarterbacks, like how far away? Like I have Ward ahead of Sanders. And I think I have both guys graded probably lower than the top two position players. And I'm with you. I think those are the two elite position players in the draft class. So if you're a Giants fan, I know you desperately need a quarterback. I get that.
Yeah.
And I don't disagree with it at all. Is it the worst thing of the world that if you walk away with this thing with Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter? Or do you think these two quarterbacks are so good that you definitely want to make sure you walk away with one of them?
Well, you obviously want a quarterback just because the Giants, they desperately need one. They need a long-term answer there. So option number one, you hope that Shedeur or Cam fall to you at 3 overall. I think they would be happy to have either one just because they don't have an answer on the roster right now. But if Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter fall in your lap, you're not mad about that at all. Like we mentioned, we both believe we're in agreement that either one of those guys could go at number 1 overall. Carter probably more so than Hunter just because of positional value. But I think you're not complaining at all if you end up with Carter or Hunter just because the Giants have needs at either one of those spots. But you always want to be in position of where you take the best player available that makes the most sense. And I think either one of those guys would make sense if a quarterback is not available to them on the board at 3.
If both are there, do you pick Ward or Sanders?
I like Cam better right now, and I've been saying this since really September. I think the perfect coach for Cam Ward would be Brian Dable, just because I think the mixture of both of them is really a recipe for success. Just because with Cam, the biggest thing that Cam has to learn in order to have success on the next level is just be okay with good and not chase the great. That's what you see a lot on tape with him is that he's chasing the great, and sometimes he has to be satisfied with taking the good. And his time at Miami, yes, he put up those miraculous numbers. I think the world of Cam. I think he's going to be a productive player on the next level. I've already said, I've put it out on record that he reminds me of Jordan Love when he was coming out of Utah State, and that there's a lot of turnover worthy plays with him, but that's just the life of a playmaker. And for every 9 or 10 good throws that he has, there's going to be 2 or 3 that leave you scratching your head. But like we see with, and now I'm not comparing him to these guys, but with Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and all these electrifying playmakers, there's always going to be those 2 or 3 head scratching plays, but there's going to be those 9 or 10 that make you sit up in your seat and go, wow. And that's what happens. And that's what you see a lot with Cam Ward on tape. So he has to go to a position coach or a demanding head coach that can rein in some of those turnover worthy plays. But there's a lot of times where you just have to let him be him. But I would rather have a quarterback like that as opposed to somebody that's hesitant to throw the ball downfield.
I'd rather have to rein somebody in than tell them to
Yep.
to rev the engine a little bit. I'm with you. Final question. Compared to the guys last year, where would you have Cam Ward in your quarterback stack last year?
Both would be in that Penix Knicks tier for me, along with McCarthy. They would be in that similar tier. So that quarterback, 5, 6, 7 range. I think that's where they would end up going. But like I said, I'm higher on Cam Ward than a lot of people. I think a lot of people are really overthinking him, especially with the turnover worthy stuff. It's just a matter of you got to rein that in a little bit. And I think that's gonna make or break his performance on the next level. But as far as just from a traits standpoint, I think he's right in that tier, with Penix, McCarthy, and then also Nix. I think in that quarterback 5, 6, 7 range.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I think I haven't. I've watched probably 6 games of Ward. I'm going to watch every snap just because it's a big deal with quarterback. So I think I might have him ahead of McCarthy. I might have him at 4 last year, but I'll have to wait and see as I get through it. Jordan, good stuff, my friend. You got anything coming out on ESPN that you want the folks to know about?
No, right now we're just revving up for the combine. Actually, I do. I lied. I actually have my top 50 coming out on
Nice.
February 8th. So that'll be releasing. And then also we'll be revving up for the combine, of course. And then we'll be releasing our official big boards. We'll have a ton of mock drafts as well. And then we'll have our Sports Center specials. It's a tongue twister. Sports Center specials that are starting to go on. Me, my colleagues, Phil Yates, Matt Miller, and also, of course, the Godfather, Mel Kiper Jr.
Absolutely. Jordan, always good to talk. I'll talk to you. Always good to see you. Look forward to seeing you in the combine in a few weeks, my friend.
Thanks as always, John.
Safe travels. That's Jordan Reid from ESPN on the Giants Huddle podcast brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. We'll see you next time, everybody.